So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt more connected to the town right next door than your own? Well, today, we're diving into the story of a community that's taking that feeling to a whole new level. They're actually asking to officially switch the city they belong to.
Yeah, I mean, why would an entire neighborhood want to, metaphorically speaking, pack up its bags and join a different city? That's the big question we're tackling. And it's not really about politics in the way you might think. It's about geography, it's about daily life, and a really unique urban planning puzzle that's left a whole community feeling, well, stranded from its own city hall.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, you need to meet the main characters in our story. First, you've got Bellaterra, this residential community. Then there's Cerdanyola, which is its official city right now. And finally, there's Sant Cugat, the city that Bellaterra feels it really belongs to. And the reason for that feeling, well, it's surprisingly concrete.
So let's get into it. And this whole thing starts not with some political argument, but with something you can actually see and touch, a huge physical barrier.
No, seriously, it sounds a little dramatic, but it's completely true. If you live in Bellaterra, you can't just walk or drive into the main part of your own city, Cerdanyola. There's something really, really big standing in the way.
And listen, we're not talking about a couple of fences here. We're talking about the absolutely enormous campus of the Autonomous University of Barcelona, plus the AP7 highway, which is one of the busiest in the whole region. You put those two together, and you get a permanent, practically impassable barrier that just cuts Bellaterra clean off from its own city.
But here's the kicker. This wasn't some accident. It was actually done on purpose. High-level urban planning from the Barcelona Metropolitan Plan literally designed this area to be a big open space. The goal was to stop cities from just bleeding into each other and becoming one giant urban sprawl. And hey, the plan worked. But it had this massive unintended consequence for all the people living in Bellaterra.
So think about it. If you're physically cut off from your official city, where do you actually live your life? Where do you go for everything? Well, the data tells a pretty clear story.
And when you look at the survey results, the answer just jumps right off the page. It's overwhelming. A huge majority, 60% of the residents, say they identify with Sant Cugat. And how many feel connected to their official city, Cerdanyola? Just 9%. 9! And this isn't just a vague feeling, it's a direct reflection of how they live every day. And you can't really blame them, right? Getting to Cerdanyola is a hassle. But on the other hand, there's a direct train line that takes you from Bellaterra straight into the heart of Sant Cugat. So when it's time to go shopping, go to the bank, or just meet up with friends, the choice is pretty obvious. And this disconnect leads to a very real problem. It all boils down to something that's been called a service grievance. Just imagine this. You're paying your property taxes to Cerdanyola for, say, a brand new library or a swimming pool. But for you, that library is on the other side of a massive highway and there's no easy way to get there. That feeling of paying for things you can't realistically use, well, that's the core frustration that's driving this entire movement.
Okay, so the daily life argument is pretty strong. But, changing city lines isn't just about feelings or convenience. It's about the money, right? Can this move actually work on paper?
Right. This is the big one. The $1 million, or I guess the €2 million question. If Bellaterra were to join Sant Cugat, could it cover its own costs? Or would it just be a financial drain on its new home? Well, the studies have been done, and the numbers are actually pretty clear. The answer seems to be a big yes. Just the revenue from property tax alone brings in about €2.5 million a year. That's already more than the estimated $2.2 million it would cost to cover all the essential services. And remember, that's just from property taxes, not all the other income the area generates.
And look, this isn't just some number they pulled out of a hat. That cost estimate is based on a legal requirement for what's called Mandatory Minimum Services, or SMO. This is the official list of things every city has to provide, like streetlights, garbage collection, sewers, the basics. So the whole financial case is built on a really solid legal foundation.
All right, so let's recap for a second. The geography makes sense. The social connection makes sense. The money seems to work out. But what about the local politics? What happens to the local government that Bellaterra already has?
So, here's an interesting twist. Bellaterra already has its own little local government. It's called an EMD. And the funny thing is, the very reason this thing even exists is proof of the whole problem. It was created specifically because Bellaterra was so cut off from Cerdanyola that it needed its own local body just to manage basic services.
So what would happen to this EMD if they joined Sant Cugat? Well, the law is actually super specific about this. On the day of the annexation, the EMD keeps running temporarily, so there's no gap in services. But then, after the very next municipal election, it is legally and automatically dissolved.
gone. From that point on, it's up to Sant Cugat and the regional government to figure out the best way to administer the area going forward.
So the most important thing to get from this is that the EMD is just a temporary bridge. It's not the final destination. Its survival can't be a deal breaker for the annexation to happen. The whole point of this citizen-led movement is about joining Sant Cugat, and the nitty-gritty administrative details of what happens after that, well, that's a separate decision for the new city and the region to make.
Okay, we've gone through the why and the how, so let's take a look at where all of this stands right now, today.
You have to remember, this whole thing kicked off from the ground up. It started with the citizens themselves. And we're talking about an incredible number. More than 60% of all registered voters in Bellaterra signed the official petition to get this journey started. This is a powerful, grassroots movement.
And what's more, the courts have basically given them the green light to make their case. A huge high court ruling from just this past June confirmed that this process is legitimate and that it has to be studied on its own merits. It can't just be blocked or dismissed out of hand. For the residents, this was a massive win.
So when you boil it all down, their argument really rests on 4 key pillars. You've got a permanent, planned physical barrier. You have an undeniable social and daily life connection to Sant Cugat. You've got the financial numbers to prove it's viable. And finally, you have a clear legal process for what happens next.
And so, after all that, the ball is no longer in Bellaterra's court. The file, with all this evidence, is now on the desks of the people who will make the final call, the regional government of Catalonia and, of course, the city of Sant Cugat itself.
And this whole story leaves us with a really fascinating question, one that goes way beyond this one community. In a world that's always changing, what really makes a city? Is it a line on a map that was drawn 100 years ago? Or is it the paths people travel every single day to live, to work, and to feel like they belong? Bellaterra's case is asking all of us to think about that.